Hello, and welcome to another W.Media DC Talk podcast, where as always, I'll be joined by industry experts and thought leaders to discuss the various issues facing the cloud and data center business. Now, the skills gap, of course, is something that the data center industry has been trying to deal with to one extent or another for years. Bringing on board new talent is essential, not just for normal operations, but particularly in avoiding outages and unexpected downtime. When you add to this the emergence of AI and increased automation, these challenges could take on a whole new light. So with this in mind, today we're going to be discussing standards and certification, talent acquisition, and the role AI has to play. My name's Carl Looms, and I'm going to be moderating the panel. And then now, if I could perhaps just get our guests to introduce themselves. Mike, maybe we can start with you, please.
Yeah, Girl, thanks for having me. My name's Mike Mayer. I'm Managing Director at Portman Partners. We're a global search and selection firm focused predominantly on the data center and digital infrastructure sectors. We have global representation with boots on the ground in Asia, Australasia, the US, and the UK. So, at the forefront of the resource issues within the sector.
My name is Edward Ten Leet. I'm the chairman and CEO for the EPI group of companies. We are based headquarters out of Singapore and have 11 offices around the world. And we basically provide data center services to the industry, which include data center training, data center auditing for facility operations, and the ISO standards.
I'm Ian Bitterlin. I've been in the data center industry since the very late 80s. I'm basically an engineer, power and cooling engineer, looking at the infrastructure of data centers since then through UPS and cooling systems. And so 35 years in the data center industry, following 20 years in industrial drives and stuff like that.
Thank you. So let's get down to it with our first question then. How important is certification and industry standards when it comes to reducing outages and downtime for data centers? Edward, maybe we can start with you on this one.
Well, I think it's quite important actually, but I think you have to be careful because sometimes people take certification in like an isolation, and we always look at say that standards and certification is important in three areas of a data center. We believe that basically in order to run a data center effectively and efficiently, there are three things that you need to do. You need to take care of what we call the three Ps. One is product, process, and people. And obviously the product that we refer to as the data center itself. So the thing that we sometimes see in the industry that people put a lot of focus on, for example, the facilities. They go at great length, building in redundancy and all that based on standards like, for example, the TA 942 or the ISO 22237. But that, would not, meet all the purposes because you can have the best, physical facilities in the world. But in the end of the day, if you don't run it properly with, having the right processes in place, security processes, operations processes, and if you don't have the right people with the right competences, then everything still falls apart. So in this sense, we always believe that, if you're applying standards and you would go ultimately for certification, then you need to do it across the board. Yeah, so taking care of the product itself, the data center, all the processes, governance, maintenance, and then of course also for the people. And of course, it's not, the holy grail. It doesn't mean that if you follow standards that nothing's going to happen because there are always elements of surprises, so to speak. Equipment failures could happen. People might click the wrong button at the wrong time. But I guess it basically gives you a good benchmark for best practices that are well accepted across the world, basically. So overall, I think it really contributes to the overall reliability and resiliency and efficiency of data centers.
Ian, maybe we can get your thoughts on this.
I think standards are more important to people who buy data centers or have them built by other people because it gives you a timetable, a pattern to build to. You know what you're getting. If you specify a standard and it's built to that standard, then you get what you're paying for. As far as actually outages, it's quite straightforward. It's never been any different. Whether you go all the way back 2004 to the Uptime Institute original white papers in tier classifications with the 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then TIA 942, BICSI, and finally EN 5600, which is the European standard, which is becoming an ISO standard, piece by piece, so a global standard. They're all based on 4 levels. So you know exactly what you're going to get, although it was a bit vague in the first place with the tier classification, a little bit vague, but you know what you're going to get. You pay for a tier 3, it's going to be this. It's going to be concurrently maintainable. If you pay for tier 4, and not many people do these days, you know it's going to be concurrently maintainable and fault tolerant, for example. So the reliability and the outages of the data center itself, are quite well defined in all of the standards. You know, TIA and BICSI are both ANSI standards, American standards. EN 5600 is a Euro norm, but it's becoming an ISO standard, so that'll cover all regions of the world. And the Uptime Institute was never a standard; it was an ipso facto standard written by a private company without any peer review or involvement. Nevertheless, it set the way for all of the others, so it's still of valuable use. So, as far as operating the data center, you need all of the right procedures, you need all the right staff, you need all of the right training, and you need all of the right testing and simulation of failures. And that's where nearly all of the standards, except the Uptime Institute, are fairly weak in describing exactly what you need to run a data center. The Uptime Institute, although you could say they only do it for money, which is fine. Money is a good motivator. Their operational sustainability standard, the badge, you might get a tier 3 certification for the design, then you have to get it for the build to make sure you built what you designed, and then you can go on and get it for the operability. That's all about training, simulation, training, documentation, and that's where the outages come, because as there are many standards, many searches in the world have discovered and reports that 70% of all data center outages are human error. And no amount of standardization will stop human error. What will stop human error is recruiting the right people, either getting them inexperienced and training them really well, then continually retraining them to operate the system. And the industry's been full of examples over the years of people who employ good people, put them in their job, and then never let them touch the system until it breaks down. And then when it breaks down, they have no idea how to fix it. There've been well-documented examples of Microsoft Azure in Japan, which, they rented someone else's data center and had no idea how it worked, and it went out offline for several hours, 3 years running, I think, because of operator error and then not being able to restart the bit of the equipment that had gone wrong. It's a question of people. People cause errors, and the only way to minimize them is to train the people. It's interesting that people say you should automate the data center and get rid of the people. Actually, that's the worst thing you can do, because if you automate it, history has proved that when it goes wrong, it's almost impossible to find someone to fix it, because the first person that fixes it has got to fix the automated system first. So that idea of manual control needs to be retained.
Okay, thank you. What part, if any, do you think AI and automation are going to play in this field? And Mike, what are your thoughts?
I think the general consensus within the data center sector is that AI is going to have a huge impact on how we construct, operate, and manage infrastructure moving forward. I think the latest research says that AI compute intensity is doubling every 6 to 10 months, which is huge when the average construction timescale on a new build data center is upwards of 2 years. So, I think it's going to have an impact. And I'm going to quote somebody else that I heard recently that said that AI won't replace everybody in the data center industry, but it'll replace everyone that isn't going to get on board with AI. So I think it's going to have a huge impact in everybody's role, and it's going to affect people. But I think there's more positives than negatives when it comes to AI, especially from an operational perspective. Just using AI modeling and where appropriate, linking that in with the IoT side of things, it reduces maintenance costs. I think McKinsey quoted figures of up to a quarter reduction in maintenance costs. I think it bolsters cybersecurity, and it's constantly learning, understanding how the evolving cyber threats can be prevented. So it's an effective defense mechanism, I think. So it also helps with efficiency and sustainability when we're looking at distributing sort of workload efficiency and where to pick that up. So, I mean, I think those are all the positive sides of AI and operation. I think the more challenging aspects are how AI is going to impact the human aspect, but also then the construction of data centers. So we're already seeing supply chain issues. The graphic GPUs are becoming scarce. It's challenging to get them, and the volume in which the hyperscalers are looking to procure them is huge. So I was reading an article the other day that said to sort of build a 2 nanometer chip factory either in the US or Europe would cost around $40 billion. So if we're trying to ramp up the GPU production, we've got to ramp up the production of factories to manufacture GPUs, and it's a chain effect. So I think AI is going to have a massive impact on our lives in general, and where the data stored in data centers, physical data centers, and in the cloud and everywhere else is going to be impacted by that.
What do you think, Edward?
I think it will be, quite a big. And I think AI has a major impact on the data centers, not only, in terms of the role it plays in our lives, but particularly also in, for example, design and build, and also, in operations. I think we have to be a little bit careful when we talk about AI, because we see a lot of, vendors especially jumping on the bandwagon of AI, claiming to have, AI tools that can, automate the data center, etc. And sometimes it makes me laugh, to be honest, because I go to a customer and say, "Oh, we have AI implemented to optimize our cooling." And then if you ask them a little bit more, say, "Okay, how does that actually work?" And say, "Well, we have this fantastic tool, and we, set up certain parameters, and then if it doesn't give us the result, we change the parameters and make everything better, and AI is doing this for us." And obviously, that's not true, because real AI is, an autonomous system, right? It learns by itself, it adjusts by itself. So what I see is that a lot of people, call it the term AI, but it's actually the good old rule-based, optimization. But I think, the real AI, as it progresses, will definitely have an impact. We see it now happening more and more on the IC workload level. So where workload is balanced across systems, to the event, even that certain systems are automatically turned off to basically preserve power, and shifting workloads across different continents. We see it now more and more happening as well in the optimization of cooling. So in the old days, of course, the air conditioners kept blowing whatever the load was. And we see that as being more and more intelligent now, being optimized through either rule-based reasoning or, what some people now start calling AI as well. And I think if you look a little bit further in the future, I think we will see more and more that it will be used in the real-time monitoring, and mainly also in predictive maintenance. In today's market, we do maintenance, and I call it always the one click per month. The maintenance folks come in once a month, once a quarter, and do maintenance, whether it's needed or not. They still come there. And there's, of course, a cost associated with it. So I think, with AI, we could be more predictive in terms of when maintenance would really be required. And this will obviously optimize the cost factor and as well as the resource requirement. And I think that probably, if you forget about the AI role, I think if you look at, say, pure data center facilities, I think we see a more AI being used for energy efficiency purposes and for, reduction of basically overall, daily routine tasks as well as predictive maintenance.
Ian, maybe we can get your input on this.
Okay. Automation is good as long as the people operating the system know how it works and they've got manual overrides for it. AI doesn't come into the equation. I'm being a bit pedantic, but AI doesn't exist. It's artificial intelligence. If you look at the classical definition of it, we're a long way from that yet. Where we are is really good machine learning systems, and machine learning systems are written by people, usually in India and places like that, very clever, cheap labor, making very complicated algorithms that gather data from this very simple data, but they gather data from the system and try to predict failures based on human experience that's built into the machine learning algorithm. So there's definitely a place for automation. There's definitely a place for machine learning. But you'll end up buying a platform with all the machine learning built into it to run your data center. At the moment, we build the data centers with a building management system, and then an energy management system, and then finally DSIM, the data center infrastructure management, which have basically been, let's say, a technical but a commercial disaster. They're far too expensive to buy, and you don't get a return on your investment. You have to have a BMS. If that BMS, building management system, becomes more automated than it is now, and with machine learning tacked into it, I think it's a good thing to do, as long as you allow the operators in the building to test everything regularly, and they're trained with the load live, not don't touch it while it's working and leave it till it breaks down, because it will break down. Everything breaks down. Yeah, electronics only have a certain life. If you don't constantly check it, it'll break down without you even noticing it coming. Better to have a failure when you do a test, because you're in control of when you have the failure, than just leave it until a machine finally breaks down at a random moment in time, which could cause you either huge financial impact or help you in some cases. If the guy that brought down Lehman Brothers had managed to sell all his shares at a moment when there was a failure in Lehman Brothers data center, Lehman Brothers wouldn't have gone bankrupt, because he wouldn't have been able to sell or buy at that moment in time. The fact is that it was always on, and it was always open to failure that had financial consequences. So yeah, there's a place for it, but it's all built on people.
Okay, thank you. So the next question then, what roles and positions are you noticing are the most difficult to fill, and what can employers do to help address the problem? Mike, maybe we can start with you.
I think a scarcity of talent is global, and it's across the board. Right from leadership who are coming in with cognitive diversity and innovation, and having that filter down through the organizations. But I think every day you go onto companies' websites and they're listing hundreds of roles within their data center environment. So I don't think it's specific, but I think it's all the way from engineering and ops right up to leadership, but also those that support the data center industry, HR, marketing, finance. We're seeing a growth in all of them. Portman focuses predominantly on the leadership level, and we're seeing, job roles advertised right through from sales to CEO. A lot of new investment. So the capital markets are investing in the data center industry, and with that comes C-suite roles. So effectively, it's new money coming to the market, looking to build a leadership team that can then build infrastructure and then build, additional resource, additional capacity. So it's across the board, really.
Okay, maybe we can get Edward's idea next.
Well, frankly, it's across the board. If we talk to, data center operator owners, and that includes, of course, the commercial operators, hyperscalers, but also enterprise data centers, I think everybody's suffering, in terms of getting the right people, and getting people even, in that sense. And I think it has to do with a few things. There is quite an outflow, the older folks, so to speak, what probably includes me after 10 or 20 or 30 years, whenever I feel like. So people will start leaving the industry and taking with them, of course, a lot of experience. The younger folks might not always be, so happy to work in data centers, because it's quite a stressful job. Yeah, it's a very interesting industry. It's very fast moving, but you be basically 24/7. When people have their Christmas dinner, you might be sitting in a computer room doing stuff. So it's not always the most attractive job in the real world. So, but if you talk to the folks in general, it's like I said, across people with the right design skills. Operations staff also is a big issue. If you go, of course, a little bit further at the top layer, the IT layer, I think especially with AI and cloud, it's very, very hard to find people. And if you find them, it's very, very expensive. And we see that, for example, in certain areas, especially here in Asia, where you would assume that, in certain countries, maybe, there's a lot of labor. It might even be, very cost efficient, right? Compared with, for example, salaries in the UK or Amsterdam versus maybe, say, in Malaysia or Thailand. But the fact is, because of this skill shortage, you see that salaries are just going through the roof. And sometimes the cost to build looks on paper cheaper. But if you need to get good project managers and good architects and all that, the prices, are sometimes even higher than what you would get in, for example, a market like Europe, purely because of the shortage that is available. So I think everybody's suffering, and that is not going away because, you can't learn how to play tennis out of a book. So although you can go through courses, etc., it really helps with the foundation. But of course, the experience will come in over time, and that's not a trick fix. So pretty tough, I think, for folks.
Ian, what do you think?
Well, from a UK perspective, I think the problem is that our education system has taken the pedal off the accelerator as far as STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and we've not, because we've exported most of our manufacturing outside of the country. Not all, but most. There's a lot of jobs gone with it, technical engineering jobs. So when I left school in the late 60s, I had a choice of 5 different apprenticeships I could have gone into. I chose one of them. There were jobs aplenty, and there were factories that I could go to, and drawing offices that I could go to, and industries that were manufacturing goods. And we had a lot of apprentices. We had a lot of engineers. A big pool of labour. Now, if you talk about being an engineer, in the UK at least, the first thing people think about is someone that might fix your washing machine or your car, not necessarily, in other words, a tradesperson, a technician, not necessarily a clean job. And kids leaving school are less interested than ever before because there are less opportunities. Data centres, have great opportunities for such technicians at every level, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. The whole thing is built on a raft of people that can fix machinery. But the machinery is never built in the UK, or hardly ever built in the UK. So we're dependent on importing equipment for the data centres and having it serviced by the original equipment manufacturers, who then have problems recruiting people because we're all getting older. I've been in this industry 35 years. I'm 73 next birthday. I've retired. I'm sorry for the industry we find ourselves in the UK, in that we don't have factories where people can go and work and design things and build things. But that's where we are. So I think the bottom line is the pyramid in a data center. The structure of it is the manager of the M&E department, the heads of department, mechanical, electrical, them. The charge hands and the technicians actually running the data center. It's as the pyramid gets fatter towards the bottom, the problems start. Yeah, you only need one manager in every data center for this. Let's say the infrastructure, but you need probably 20 or 30 people on 3 shifts. So that's 60 people to run it, and so you have to bring in people who were never trained in data centers. Not that that's necessarily important.
Okay. What role does or should in-house training have, and where should outside professional training and certification come into it? Mike, what are your thoughts?
This is an interesting topic, I think, because we know there's a scarcity of resource within the data center industry, and I think there needs to be an absolute mind shift within HR and talent acquisition within operators and construction companies. More so, I was seeing it in construction now than in operational data centers, is that typically HR are just box checking, and any job description for anybody in the data center industry comes with a requirement to have, a level of experience, whether that's 1, 3 or 5 years. And we've exhausted the talent pool, and poaching is not good for the industry. And that's what's happening, I think, predominantly now, is we're poaching. So there's 2 aspects to this that I think could potentially solve the issue moving forward. The one is apprenticeship or early careers, so bringing apprentices on and training them internally, or outsourcing their training. And secondly is bringing in people from parallel sectors. And there's so many data center training courses out there, and I think people that have been in the industry are probably a little bit out of touch with the latest technology and the latest standards and specifications that you've mentioned. So I think recruiting young people or recruiting from outside the sector and actually making training a key aspect of onboarding those individuals, putting them through data center training courses, data center awareness courses, all those sorts of things, which probably takes, a couple of weeks if they're intense enough. you probably have somebody that's more up to date with the latest trend, standard, and innovation than somebody that's been working with the industry for multiple years. So I think that the training and has a huge place to play. But I also think then a budding system would work as well. And actually understand that you're recruiting people to the industry, and that's going to be an onboarding, time scale, and you utilize that for training and budding systems. So very quickly you get them up to scratch. And then it's processes and monitoring how they perform. But I don't think we solve it by just pinching people from our competitors. We've got to bring in new blood and train them and get them up to spec.
What do you think, Edward?
Well, that's actually a very good question because, some of the customers, of course, do in-house, some go the external route. And if, look at it myself, I think for the, let's say the general, right, getting people to understand standards, design principles, methodologies, etc. I think that is very good fit for external training. If it's more an application-specific training, for example, how to operate our switchgear, etc., that is very site-specific. And of course, that is better left, to in-house training. But in-house training has various issues, I think, in general. First of all, building training material is not easy. It's more than just putting a few bullets on a slide. There need to be a certain flow in it, etc. Not every engineer is a very good trainer. Let's put it this way. And obviously, they are busy already with a day job. So the question is, do you want them to fix problems, or do you want them to stand in front of the class for a couple of days? The other side is thing that we notice some biting, that's the feedback that we get from some of the customers that have tried to embark on internal programs for, say, generic training. They said, what we find out is that, as I said before, not everybody's a good trainer, but also it seems that there's a bit of call it a political game going on, that the senior folks don't always want to tell the junior folks all the things they know, because everybody's, worried about the rice bowl. And they think, well, if this new guy that comes in, who is maybe cheaper, younger, I tell them all the tricks of the trade, then, maybe, then they might kick me out. So you really have to think about it, right? Is your job running a data center, or do you want them to become a trainer? And I think for site-specific, definitely there's a role. But I think for generic training, you need to get that outsourced. That is just a far more efficient way of doing it.
Okay, so finishing with a fairly broad question then. With the emergence of AI, how do you think it's going to change the data center landscape over, say, the next 5 years?
Well, 5 years is quite a jump in the future. We know that with all the drastic changes happening and really so fast as well, I think it's a bit hard to predict 5 years because... But if you look at the current situation already, it's dramatic. It's really dramatic. We are involved in some large AI projects. And it's just ridiculous the amount of power, for example. 500 megawatt, 1 gigawatt data centers is just mind-boggling compared to what we saw 10 years ago. So I think that's having an impact on, what is already, stressful in most countries, right? Shortage of power. We know that in certain countries, like in Europe, as well as here in Singapore, there's a moratorium to basically clamp down a little bit on the development, purely because of power shortage. And that is the traditional data center, right? Maybe 3, 5, 6, 10 kilowatt per rack. And then we move into AI and we start looking about 40, 60 kilowatt per rack. So that has a dramatic impact. Can we actually build them? And where? What energy are we going to use? Because everybody's concerned about pollution and sustainability. So that needs to dramatically be investigated. How are we going to power all the design? Very different. Like I said, we are involved in some of the projects, and the difficulties that they find sometimes is just very different than traditional data. To give you a quick example, one of the design phases we went through, we looked at workload. And a normal data center is relatively standard in terms of workload. And it goes up a bit, goes down a little bit. But in the AI data center, it could literally jump from, say, 20% workload to 100% workload and back again. Now, that is obviously not a problem if you're running a 100 kilowatt data center. But if you're running a 100 megawatt data center, the utility company is going to, scroll you upside down, because those kind of impacts on the grid will have a major impact. And it's just a simple thing that has an impact. Cooling. Which cooling equipment can handle a workload that suddenly jumps from, say, 100 megawatt to 800 megawatt? So all these things are very design specific that we haven't come across in traditional design. So I think that is a major impact from a pure environmental and general investment wise. Traditional investment models into commercial data centers was relatively predictable. I haven't found many people that know exactly how AI is going to turn out in terms of being commercialized versus the investment that goes into those massive data centers. So that is going to be something that has to be worked out, where the real estate investors or the investors in general in data centers, are they going to get the money back on AI deployments? So that is a problem. I think in general, design is going to be very, very different. Most of the data centers in the AI industry, they're going for liquid cooling, immersion cooling style, cold plating, which is a technology that is not really, I would say, ironed out like, the traditional air cooling. So design is going to be different. Managing is going to be different. Obviously, since it is one big deployment, it might be a little bit easier to manage. And if you compare like the old enterprise data centers, it typically looks like a museum with all kind of different operating systems, applications, boxes that look different. And with AI, it's a relatively homogeneous type of architecture. And obviously, since you're doing AI, you might as well have AI, managing the data center itself as well. So I think it's across the board. Investment-wise, it's going to be, different. Design-wise, it's going to be different. How you operate and manage it is going to be different. And I think a lot of people are not really, I would say, passionate about what is the life cycle going to be. We know the traditional data center life cycles in terms of IT replacement. Is that going to be the same with all this new stuff, the GPUs? Is that going to live for like traditionally 5, 6, 7 years, or are we having to replace it in 2, 3 years? That is going to be, quite a few challenges and question marks that at the moment that nobody can say I have 10 years AI experience. So some of those things will really, come to the surface in terms of challenges that we face, and then think about how we go about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mike, what are your thoughts?
I think everybody's got an opinion on this, but the consensus is that AI is going to drive rack density, and as rack power density increases, then there's all the peripherals that you have to manage and consider. So, I mean, typical rack densities are between 5 and 7 kilowatts in today's terms. The talk is in the not too distant future that's 50 kilowatts, or it's getting close to 50 kilowatts already. And I've heard people talking figures of 100 to 300 kilowatts in the next 5 to 10 years. So there's two options here, I think, and I think that operators are looking at two things: either looking to procure bigger campuses with more power to accommodate these requirements, so they're building bigger, which is the hyperscale route. I mean, we used to see, 2, 10, 20, 40, 80 megawatt campuses being built, and those were considered quite big in the day. Now, 100 megawatt, and there's now talks of gigawatt campuses being built. So people are looking for bigger to accommodate. But, other than the practicalities of that are sort of more finite. It's land and power. I mean, those are the two issues that we're going to see the biggest challenges of finding and resourcing land and power. And then not to mention the challenging political environment around data centers and the negativity around data centers. So we need a bit of a PR campaign in sort of demystifying data centers and what AI data centers are doing, coming to some sort of consensus on the power and water requirements for those, and actually getting our neighbors more on board with what we're doing. I think that's a sort of a really important strategy, especially when it comes to new build data centers. Then there's the other option, which is the sustainable option, and that's reconfiguring your data center for AI. And this isn't obviously possible in all cases, but I think, as a first point of call, operators should be looking at how they can reconfigure to maximize what they already have available. So quick reconfigurations and putting that at the heart of your strategy, and put sustainability at the heart of your strategy. So I think that could be really interesting. So then maximizing the space of existing sites, as I've just mentioned, to help with support the high loads, is no longer, I don't think, an intangible concept. It's a very real issue, and reconfiguration is being addressed around the globe, I think. I also think we need to make some better decisions that will help us prolong the longevity of data center products. Such as there's all the hype of changing potential cooling methods. So air, the common are air cooling, immersion cooling, and then direct chip to liquid cooling. And I think that data center operations should probably look at a hybrid solution and how they can integrate all of these. But they also come with, restrictions when you consider typical data centers were built for lightweight or fairly lightweight, low density racks. When you start talking water cooled or immersion cooling systems, the weight loading is huge. So, not all data centers can retrofit, but I think it should be a consideration. And I think those are the main points for me.
Thank you. As always, we've been asking our social media followers to write in with some questions as well. So I will just pick out a few of these before we go. Simon S., are you noticing any regional differences in the talent pool or recruitment success across APAC? And I'll just throw this one out to whoever wants to answer.
Well, I think certainly, yes, we're seeing a lot of activity in APAC. I think the recent lift on the moratorium of building data centers and the news that I think Singapore particularly has at 90% occupancy rate, we are going to see new infrastructure being built. We've seen the likes of Vantage already announce, new construction, and we've seen a lot of activity with the technology companies out there. So the likes of Green Revolution Cooling and so forth, growing their teams out in Asia Pac, and I think that's all in anticipation of a boom in the market. And once again, we know Singapore, the challenges are land and power. So once they navigate that, I think we're going to see even a bigger up ramp in the requirement for talent. But we are seeing activity.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think the most important thing to realise, especially in areas like APAC, that the actual construction of the data centres, there isn't a skills shortage or a capacity shortage, because the cheapest way of doing it is to use Chinese companies with Chinese labour. It's not exactly very sustainable, but it's certainly a way to get rapid construction. The operation of the data centre and the management of it is the thing that has to be done with higher skills, and those skills are in short supply wherever you go in the world.
That's great, thank you. So another question from the audience, Desmond C. If AI begins to actually take over jobs, who should bear responsibility for reskilling or upskilling the people who are currently doing those jobs? And again, anyone?
Well, the first thing is to understand that AI in its present form, and probably its likely form for the next 15 or 20 years, is actually not artificial. It's machine learning. It's written by people for machines in algorithms. Those algorithms are getting more and more sophisticated, and some of those algorithms are capable of further enhancing those algorithms. So the real point about AI is that at the moment it's 80% hype and 20% reality. And it's sort of the Pareto law. The hype is that it is artificial, and you can just put a computer in a place and turn it on, and you say, "Oh, I've got AI." No, you haven't. You've got to look at what your task is, the same as you would be if you were a finance business or a platform for social networking. You look at your business need and you adapt the hardware to suit, and then you build out your infrastructure to suit that. So AI at the moment is concentrated in only the large operators. It's effectively research. It's effectively research trying to build models. And there is no use for it yet, because it hasn't been created yet in its sort of rollout form. You can't just roll out AI into a data center. You can say, I am AI ready. It's become almost a sales mantra.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly it, is that the hyperscale data center operators and cloud operators and GPU manufacturers are all in business because of the social side of the internet. Because if we look at business processes, it's about efficiency, and it's efficiency meaning doing less for the same result. And all businesses are trying to be more efficient. So our demand on the internet and data centers, in theory, is becoming less because our processes are getting better. And the growth then down to not your conventional businesses, or the ones who are getting taxed and incorrectly branded as the destroyers of the planet, when it is when it is the people that are the ones championing the destroying of the planet and focusing on data centers like, the Extinction Rebellion and so forth, that are actually the ones that are most responsible.
Yeah, there's a really interesting point that you've touched on in the core of your argument. It's really interesting because a lot of people still mistakenly use PUE as a reference to data center efficiency. It's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the overhead of a data center. We get that, but many marketing departments don't. The really interesting thing is that the hyperscalers shout about PUE, although they haven't improved in 5 years, but we'll come on to that maybe later, but they shout about it, and they do their computing very, very effectively, more effectively than all colos put together and all enterprises put together. Unfortunately, they're using it for bullshit computing. They're using it for frivolous computing, whereas a bank that really could put all their stuff into the cloud, in other words, someone else's data center, one of the hyperscalers, they could put it and they could save an awful lot of energy. But the only thing is they're not particularly attractive customer for a hyperscaler because every time they refresh their IT hardware, their demand goes down because they're not based on images. They're based on just data and transactions and your bank account and stuff like that. Actually, those sort of enterprises that aren't predicated on social networking, photographs of your pet eating your dinner, that sort of stuff, their actual demand in kilowatt terms is going down year on year as they refresh their hardware. The hardware is getting more and more effective per watt. But that's not a very attractive business for someone when instead they can get, as you said, influencers, cheap goods made in cheap areas using cheap labour and destroying the environment there instead of here. We've not only exported jobs, we've also exported our environmental pollution.
I think that's a good point for me to jump in where time is running away with us. So that's all for today. I just want to say thank you again to the panel for taking the time to speak with us, and thank you all for listening. We're going to be back on March 19th when we're going to be focusing on the Sajori region, so make sure to tune in then. If you do have any questions for our next panel, please email them in at editor@W.Media. I look forward to seeing you all then.